This is your spoiler warning for Game of Thrones, the entire TV show. If you do not want to be spoiled for any of Game of Thrones, absolutely do not watch this video. With that said, let's start with the review. So, we of course have an opening title sequence which has changed. King's Landing is a little bit damaged, it's a little bit different, it's a little bit worse if we're being honest. I like the changes they've made there. We open with these great long sequences with everybody looking around as Tyrion is looking at all the destruction that has been caused, the unnecessary destruction that he was not able to stop as much as he tried to. And then we get this moment between Jon and Grey Worm as Jon tries to stop him from executing these Lannister soldiers, and Grey Worm says that they have orders to do so, and of course he's not going to listen to Jon above Daenerys. And this is a great moment between those two, showing the tension between them. I liked how that was handled. And then of course we get more of Tyrion walking around, seeing all the destruction, seeing this council room that he had been in when he was Hand of the King back in like season 2, and everything, just all the rubble here and how destroyed it is. And then of course he comes across the actual council room with the chair that he used to sit at and all of that stuff, and that was just those are really great moments to see, and that was handled really well. And I'm actually going to bring up something right here about the ash or snow in this episode, because that's not, I was watching this episode and I never really figured out if it was ash or snow. I thought it was ash, but then it got to a certain point when it was like, no, this is definitely snow. So at this point I still believed it was ash, and I think that there was a mix between the two. So there was ash, and then later it snowed and there was more of that. But here it seems there is ash, but there could also be snow. I've never been totally clear about where the snow started to come in. That wasn't clear for me, but let's get moving on. So then Tyrion takes a torch and he goes down. He goes downstairs and he's looking for where Jaime left, and he sees all these bricks and he sees everything blocked off, and then he finds Jaime's golden hand. And that is obviously a little bit convenient. It is convenient that happened to be sticking up, that only just enough bricks fell down, that they were mostly hidden, but he could find just his hand, and of course it was enough to kill them. So that's a little bit convenient. But the reason it doesn't bother me, as convenient as it is because it provides for a really great moment for Peter Dinklage to really shine as he sees his dead sister and brother. And as much of a complicated relationship as he had with his sister, it is still his sister who died, and his dear brother Jaime, who was always there for him. And we get this great shot of Tyrion looking at their two bodies as they were together, and it's a great shot, as convenient of a moment as it really is. And as few bricks actually fell as it looked like they had in the previous episode, it doesn't bother me terribly much, just because it provides for such a great scene that really gets to me with Tyrion and his siblings. So I thought that was great, and even though it was convenient, it didn't bother me that much. So then we move on and we see Arya looking at all of the Dothraki, and we see Jon heading towards the large staircase where Daenerys is. And it does seem that the Dothraki have multiplied, because now here it appears there are several dozen of them, whereas in the previous episode it appeared maybe there were a couple dozen, maybe even 3 or 4 at most, and before that it seemed like there were only a handful. So that doesn't make any sense, and that was never clear, and that's a little bit annoying, but whatever, what can you do? So then we see Jon marching up towards Daenerys, and there's this giant Targaryen banner, which was just kind of such a great visual to see that giant banner amid these ruins and all the, at this point I'm gonna say there's snow, all the snow on that. It was a really great visual. And then of course we get these great shots of Daenerys, who has landed with Drogon, and the amazing shots as Drogon starts to spread his wings and begin to fly away. It's such an incredible visual. Everyone I was watching it with was like, whoa, that's amazing. I can't believe it was only a few seconds shot, but it was absolutely gorgeous, and I loved it. And I think it's the best shot possibly of the entire episode, and one of the best shots of the show. And then we see her looking out at her troops, all of the Unsullied and the many Dothraki. As you can see, there's tons of them. It didn't used to be, so that again is a little bit bothersome, but only just. And all the destruction and all the snow in the city, it's such a visual now that she has finally gotten here to Westeros and taken the Iron Throne and taken King's Landing and done what she's always promised to do. And then she has this great speech to all of these people that really make her intentions truly known. And this is all handled really well. And there's so many great shots here of her just looking out upon these people. And I love how well realized this all is. And there's just one great shot of Drogon and Daenerys. And there's just lots of beautiful artwork in this episode that I loved seeing. And just the imagery is just really well handled, and I appreciated that. And of course, there was this moment where she basically puts Grey Worm in charge of her entire force, which is basically an important moment for what happens later in this episode, but also a very good moment because it is giving Grey Worm the respect that he deserves. He has always been there by her side, and he's been a very, very valuable person to her. So seeing him get that was a very nice thing to see, and I did appreciate that. And then she has this speech where she's talking about, liberating the people of the world and continuing to do what they've done, which of course also means killing lots more people. And this is a great and very important scene with her and everyone that she's commanding, which is obviously significantly less people than before, but she's got a dragon, so they do mean serious business. It's not like other people are going to have scorpions to defend themselves from her. So this is just such a interesting scene to watch. And I mean interesting just because there's lots of different things in your head as a viewer, this being a person that you're familiar with, but now having gone to these extremes and now trying to do this stuff. It's just really well handled. And then we have this moment where she says that Tyrion betrayed her, and he's like, yeah, I betrayed you, and you killed lots of people, probably tens of thousands, I forget how many. And then such a moment when he takes that pin and he throws it down the steps. That was fantastically done, and I wasn't expecting that, but it surprisingly was just a really good moment that I thought was very well handled. She then proceeds to have her Unsullied take Tyrion away to be thrown in the dungeon, and he gives Jon this look of, you see what's happening here, right? And Jon knows what's happening. He's seen it in the streets, and he gives Daenerys this look of just, he can't believe what she's done. This is my interpretation, of course. And then she leaves, and Arya shows up, and this is a great little moment between these two. I love moments with Jon and Arya. I just do. And he sees her, and he's like, oh my god, this is my little sister. Not so little anymore, of course. And how are you okay? And she cuts right to the chase. He's like, what are you doing here? And she's like, I came to kill Cersei. And then she's like, this is bad, right? She's awful. Something has to be done. She's probably going to kill you. And I really, really like this scene. And I didn't mention this in my review of the last episode, but I should have, because I thought that all that stuff with Arya was all set up because she was going to try to kill Daenerys. And I didn't think she was going to succeed. I thought she was going to get killed trying, and that really worried me. But I believed that all of that stuff that happened with her in the last episode was because this is like, okay, she's awful. I've seen it. I've seen how awful it was on the ground. I'm going to try to kill her now, and I thought she was going to fail. My theory ended up being completely wrong, so it turns out it wasn't even worth mentioning, but I've mentioned it here now, and, it's wrong. But it turns out that she had seen what had happened, and now she's telling Jon, you see how bad this is, right? Something needs to be done. If something's not done about it, then probably something's going to be done about you. And that was a great scene. And then we have this probably about 9-ish minute scene with Tyrion and Jon, which is just really great, these two having this scene together. I really like scenes with Tyrion and Jon, now that I come to think about it, which are not common at all. But they are good scenes, and there's just this dynamic of them, but both know Daenerys, and Tyrion has tried to trust in her and believe in her and do what he thought was right. He's picked someone, and he's stuck with that person, and that failed him because of what she's done and what she's become. And there's just this great conversation between the two, which I just thought was really well done. And I like a lot of the visuals here, especially because we see Jon, sitting down, leaning down, and Tyrion standing up higher than him, and just the visual of that and the dynamic of those two in this conversation as he is trying to convince him, yes, she is bad, this is why, and he tries to convince her that something has to be done, So I just thought that was handled really well, and there's just a bit of that which is it's just really well handled, and I very much appreciated the visuals of the scene and just the dialogue in the scene too, because it was just a great scene, and I wish I had more to say about it, but it was just great, and it was just all the stuff adding up to John realizing that, yeah, she really, really is bad. I mean, he knew that she wasn't good. He saw what happened last episode. He was on the streets too, but just all of these people just telling him is just adding to it, like, this is what's wrong. We know you don't want to do this. We know you don't want to realize this because she's the woman that you say you love, and that reality has to get to him. And we have this walk of him walking to Daenerys, which was a very short but good moment, and I really like the visual of this dragon under the snow, which is definitely snow at this point. That was just really beautiful, and I had to bring that up just because it's a really great visual. There's a lot of great visuals in this one. And then we have the scene when Daenerys finally sees the Iron Throne with her own eyes, which of course calls back to the season 2 finale, and that's an immediate connection in the brain of, oh, this is connecting to that, and that made this a great payoff, as it was set up way back in season 2 with all of the snow and the destroyed throne room, a little more destroyed here, of course. And I just think this is a great scene, and there's a very subtle way that Emilia Clarke plays this scene, which I thought she handled really well. And there's lots of great visuals of her approaching the throne, and there's just lots of shots here which I just have to shout out just because the scene was directed really well by David Benioff and Dan Weiss, which I liked. And just the moment of her finally reaching the throne is a great moment, because obviously she's done these bad things, but still this is what she's been trying to accomplish for a great deal of time, and now she finally has, and she actually gets the opportunity to touch that throne, which is such a moment, and the music is perfect for it, and there's just some great visuals here. And then Jon appears, and that is where the scene takes a turn, as they talk, and she talks about how when she was a child she pictured this throne, and that it was, the size of a mountain or whatever she said. And then Jon cuts to the chase like Jon would, and he's like, hey, people were slaughtered, this is bad, and I appreciate the way that Jon's written in this scene, because that's just how I believe Jon would say that. He would just cut right to the chase as she's trying to get at something else. And there's this great conversation between the two about her saying she wants to break the wheel. This is what she wants to do. And then Jon's like, I know you want to, but, and I want this to work, but I don't believe it's going to. And Kit Harington plays that really well. And then she thinks that maybe he's going to do it with her, and then the dialogue is great, and what's happening here is great. And then they finally kiss, and there's this moment where he pulls back, and I'm like, oh no, he's gonna stab her. And then his arm moved a bit, and then he pulled back again, and then he actually did stab her. This is when he pulled back again, and then he stabbed her, and I was fuck, it threw me to the floor, not literally. And I just was, I was kind of like worried that was going to happen, where he was actually going to do it, and then it happened, and it's such a moment. It's really hard to watch, because Daenerys is a much more complicated character than somebody like Tyrion or Jon Snow. She is a deep, there's so many good things about her, but there are just destructive qualities, and seeing her get murdered in this way by Jon is really hard, because we see what it does to Jon, and we just see this person who at least I cared for just getting slaughtered like that. And it's such a hard scene to watch, and it's done really well. She just gets murdered and is on the floor, and she's betrayed by the man she loved and the man who loved her. And this is an incredible shot. Again, probably like the second best shot in the episode. It's really good. Just seeing him holding her, who he betrayed, the same way that he was betrayed when he was at the Night's Watch, stabbed in the heart. this is a really hard scene for me to watch, but I thought it was really well done and beautifully performed by both of these actors. They did a great job, and there's just some amazing visuals that came. And then Drogon shows up. We hear him flying in, and this is an aspect that's not entirely clear. Did he immediately know that something happened to her? That's what I imagine, is that it clicked with him. Something bad's happening. In the same way that 3 seasons ago he came to save her in the arena. I imagine that there's some sort of a connection there, but I'm not going to get too much into that, and we could discuss that for ages, I imagine. And then there's this moment where I was like, okay, he's going to try to take out Jon. It's not going to work. He's going to be dragon-proof, but that's not what ended up happening. First, he I guess examines Daenerys, his mother, and he tries to push her, and that really hurts. Him trying to push his mother and finding that she's so limp and dead. And then this is the moment when it was like, okay, he's going to try. And then he does this where he, maybe out of anger, just starts burning to the side. He unleashes this dragon fire, not at Jon though, just at the wall, just mad, just furious, And it does slightly bother me the way that Kit Harington is kind of protecting himself from the fire. It's a little bit weird. It just doesn't quite work. But obviously there wasn't a real dragon or fire for him to know exactly what to do to. So maybe the instructions weren't all that clear. Maybe it just didn't end up quite working with the visuals. That part does slightly irk me, but it's not that big of a deal, so I'm not going to get caught up on it. And then, of course, the dragon. And it was that moment I was like, I thought that, it's going for the throne, and then it didn't. It went for the salt wall, and I was like, okay, it's going to go for the throne, and then it did. And there's some great shots with this. I thought that they handled it well. Obviously, they can't show that much, but they showed enough that it was like, yes, we saw it getting melted. We saw some great shots. We saw it bending backwards. We saw it falling apart. We saw it dripping down the side. And this is what remains. This is the Iron Throne, ladies and gentlemen. That's all that's left. And then we get, I hate to say it, but another great shot of Daenerys lying dead, cold, not cold yet, on the ground, with Drogon and Jon looking down at her, and all the snow around her, and the blood pooling out much the same way as Jon did in the season 5 finale 3 seasons ago, with her dream next to her, what ultimately led her to this death. And I just really liked that shot. And then of course we see Drogon just leave with her. He takes her away, which is kind of sweet and sad, and it's just a great scene. And I just think that this was probably the best part of the entire episode, was this scene between Jon and Daenerys. It was beautiful. It was hard to watch. It was emotional. It was a fitting end to everything that's been building up. And I really, this was the last way I expected this to go. I did not expect her to just die and then no one else to. I expected there would be bloodshed and maybe she would die. Probably not, but I never expected this to just happen. This is not how I expected Game of Thrones to go. So then move forward some amount of time. It's unclear exactly how much, so I'm just going to say some number of months, probably a couple, and we see Tyrion's beard is longer, and he gets marched out to the dragon pit by Grey Worm, and then he talks to them, and we see everyone around here. We see all of the Starks. We see a bunch of other people. Robb and Aaron, much older than the last time we saw him, and he's talking to them, and we just see how many of them are, and he says, you represent the great houses of Westeros, so choose a king, because king or queen, choose a leader, because we don't have one. And then if I remember correctly, this guy's name is Edmure Tully, I think, and this is a funny moment when he tries to stand up and take claim, and then Sansa just shuts it down. It's like, dude, no, just don't, okay? Uncle, please sit down. And then this was a moment when Sam tried to suggest democracy, which I was really like, because we'd already had this dramatic shift of, she's dead, now we're leaning towards nicer stuff happening, they're picking a ruler. So when it so quickly headed in this direction of Sam suggesting democracy, I was like pulling back, like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. I really, really won't like it if you do this. And everyone shut him down and laughed at him. So that was good. And then Tyrion suggests Bran, and he starts talking about what it means and who makes a good ruler and why they make a good ruler. And I was expecting Sansa. I was expecting her at this point to be the person who ended up on the throne. which didn't happen. He said stories, and that was the moment when it's like, oh, he's talking about Bran, and I was not sure initially how I felt about that, and then he suggested Bran, and he's like, yeah, Bran, why not? And then Bran's like, hey, why do you think I came all this way? And gives the Bran equivalent of a smile. Okay? And that is something in and of itself that I don't have time to talk about in this review, even though it is a review of the finale. What did that mean? I'll talk about that in my season overview, where I will just dig into everything I didn't fully dissect here and what I think it means. So hold me to that. If I don't bring it up in my season review, then just ask me about it. Okay? Yeah. So he's like, yeah, sure, I'll be the king. You guys down? Everyone supports it. Everyone there supports Bran being the king. It's a little interesting that nobody really questions, like, hey, actually, I think this person would be better. Everyone just kind of is like, oh, peer pressure. Sure, Bran would be great. Which is kind of interesting, and that Tyrion suggests this and everyone goes along for it. I don't know exactly that's realistic. But, they only had so much time. That's not an excuse, by the way. So I guess that's why they did it that way. I'm not really sure. It didn't bother me that much, but I would have maybe appreciated this to have... I think it would have been more realistic if this had taken much more time than this. But at the same time, it might have gotten boring if they just wasted time trying to figure out who's going to be king, and it's less entertaining that way anyway. So even though that bothers me a little bit, it's not really a bad way to go about it. And then Sansa's like, hey, brother, I support you. You'll make a great ruler, but not to the north. The north will remain an independent kingdom. And that was a moment I was like, yes, she may not be queen of all of Westeros, but she will be queen of the north. And I love that so much. And then he's like, hey, Tyrion, you are going to be my hand. And Tyrion's like, no, dude, don't make me do that. Come on, I don't want to do that. I've already done that. I should be punished for all the stuff I've done. He's like, this is your punishment. So then we go to Jon, who this cut made me basically just surprised me. I mean, just the look of Jon Snow is something I'm not used to seeing, with a beard and all that, and it is a good look, by the way. And that's a great scene with him and Tyrion, and he's like, yeah, so you're gonna go to the Night's Watch. And I basically, everyone I was watching it with kind of groaned and was like, oh, really? Poor Jon, poor bastard, has to go back to the Night's Watch after dying to leave it, literally. So that was unfortunate for him. But we'll get back to that, because it's actually not as unfortunate as I was expecting. And then there's this great little bit where Grey Worm's like, hey, we're going to go to the Isle of Noth, which is a really good moment. I really appreciate that. So good. And then there's this, we see the Stark siblings, and I just like this visual of Arya pushing Bran in the wheelchair. I don't know exactly what it is that I really like about that visual, but I really like it, so I had to mention it. Anyway, moving on. Really like this shot of the Stark siblings in order of height. Obviously, Bran's the shortest because he's sitting, although if he was standing, he'd be taller. That's needless to say. So it's just, this is a really good shot, and I like the moments that these people have with each other. Sansa with Jon, and Arya with Jon, and Bran with Jon. Sansa's hug with Jon. That's a really good moment, and I just really liked that. And when Jon talked to Arya, oh my god, guys. This was one of my favorite parts of the entire episode, because he's like, hey, it'll be okay, you can visit me. And she's like, no, I can't. And that was the immediate moment where it clicked in my head, oh my god, she's going west of Westeros. Because I had rewatched Game of Thrones recently. I did a binge about a month or two ago, and there was the part in season 6 where she's like, what's west of Westeros? And she's like, that's where I want to go. And I was like, maybe the show would do that, but I don't think so. I think they would rather kill her than do that. But then she says that, and it immediately clicks in my head, and he's like, oh, I'm sure they'd let you, no one's gonna stop you. And she's like, no, that's not what I mean, I'm going west of Westeros. And I was so happy with that. That moment satisfied me so much. It made me so happy. I was so happy for Arya. I had such a huge grin on my face as she was saying that, and it was so great. And it was immediately followed by me basically crying because of this moment between the two of them. And I love Arya and Jon moments. You know this if you watched last episode's review. I love Arya and Jon moments. They're great. And actually, wait a second, I didn't even talk about that last review. It was probably this one, but that's beside the point. So this is a great moment with that hug, and it's just, these moments are so precious to me. And there's a much more appropriate moment or equally appropriate moment between Bran and Jon, the two of them, and their dynamic is obviously much different. And there's this great shot of all three of the Starks looking at Jon as he heads off to be with the Night's Watch. Why exactly there is a Night's Watch is, again, another thing that I can't tackle in this review. Not enough time. I don't want to waste time talking about that. We'll talk about that in the Season 8 review, but this is a great shot. I love how many great shots they have in this show, really. And then there's this moment where Brienne is writing the history of Jaime Lannister, the man who really screwed her over and was not good to her in the end, but she still cares for him, and she writes more about what he did, and I thought that was a great moment. And then we have the scene where Tyrion comes back to the council room, which is now, I guess, refurbished, and it's looking much better than when he saw it at the beginning of the episode. And then everyone joins him, and we see who the new council is. It's nice. I like all of these people. They don't necessarily all make sense. I'm sure most of them were chosen because we know them, especially someone like Bronn. Like, is he really the best choice for that? But it's really entertaining, so it doesn't bother me that much. I also really like that Podrick is on the Kingsguard. That makes me happy. I like Podrick, so that's good. And of course, you know, this is a good scene. It was entertaining to see. They've got some good dialogue. But then Tyrion starts to tell that joke where he says, I once brought a honeycomb and a jackass into a brothel, and I jumped up on my seat and I leaned forward into the TV so fast, and I desperately wanted him to finish that joke, even though I knew deep down that it wouldn't be as satisfying as it needed to be for him to actually tell that joke. And deep down I knew he wasn't going to do it, and it cut away, and he didn't. So that was unfortunate. I would have loved to hear the end of that joke, but I didn't, and ultimately it was probably for the better. And we've got this nice visual of, you know, three people on horses returning to the Night's Watch. Nice little visual that is similar to the visual that we have in the very first scene of the show, but we'll get a better comparison of that at the very, very end of the episode. But a nice little visual cue that is reminiscent of the very first episode when there were the three riders up in the north. And we of course get the return of the beloved Tormund. As soon as I heard that Jon was heading up north, I was hoping we'd see him, and we did, and I'm so glad we do because I just love this character. And then we get this shot that fades out, and I thought that was the end of Game of Thrones. I thought that was the last thing we were going to see, but it wasn't, because after that we get all of these intercut shots of the three Starks, assuming that you count Jon as a Stark, and he basically is. That's what the show is telling us. We see Arya and Jon and Sansa all doing their different things. Arya is going west. She's got her needle. Jon has Longclaw, and Sansa is putting on this elegant, I'm just going to call it a gown because why not? And then we see all these shots of them walking purposefully to places. They are heading towards things, and I just love how all of these moments are intercut together. It really works to sell the ending of the show. These people going different places. All the shots are done really well, and it manages to go together very well, and everything is just handled very professionally. And I like how everybody is headed towards something. Sansa is going to be queen in the north. Jon is going up north. Arya is headed west of Westeros. And I like how well these three, I would say the most important Starks, counting Jon as a Stark and not counting Bran because he's a lesser character, how these are all put together. It makes sense to put these together at the end of the show and cut these ones all together because these people are all headed somewhere. Bran is down south doing his thing. And then we see Ghost, and I was so excited. This was my second biggest grin watching the episode was when Ghost showed up. I was so happy. And then of course Jon said hi, and that was just such a heartwarming moment. As a fan, I just really appreciated that, and it was a wonderful, wonderful moment, and it made me very happy, and I'm very happy right now talking about it. I just really was quite satisfied with that. And then we have just more shots. We see Arya headed west of Westeros. Her wonderful ship, her purposeful look. What's she gonna find? I would love to know, but probably she will be the only one to find out. And then we get this shot as, you know, Jon and them are headed up north, and we see Sansa's beautiful new crown and her absolutely gorgeous throne / chair with these direwolf heads. That's amazing. Everyone chants Queen of the North. A really satisfying ending to her arc. And I thought that I took more pleasure in that than in Bran becoming the King of Six Kingdoms. That for me was just a super satisfying resolution, and I was really happy about that moment. We see Arya heading west. That was fantastic. And then we end the whole show showing people, these wildlings, and Jon and Tormund and Ghost heading north, just as the show started, with people headed north. Only this time it's far less dangerous. We even see a little plant implying that winter is over, and that's something I wish I had time to talk about here, but I'll try to remember to talk about it in my Season 8 review. That's a mixed message from that thing. That thing is something just to talk about later. And we have another moment when I thought it was over, and it wasn't. We see Jon looking back at everything that he's left and looking forward north, and he seems pretty content with going north. And then he goes north. Everyone goes north, and with Tormund, and he joins the wildlings. And I think I really like that ending for Jon. And that is the end of Game of Thrones. This is the last shot we get of the entire show. These three characters, they've chosen to focus on where they are headed and end the show on that note. And I think it's a great note to end on, and the music is perfect. I haven't talked about the music much last couple of episodes, but it's always been excellent. And right here, it was absolutely incredible, and I loved it. Overall, I thought that this episode was great. It basically served as two separate episodes combined into one. There was the first half with the death of Daenerys, and that was all handled very well. I thought that the first half of the episode was fantastic. It is the better half. It is excellent. It is really well done, but it doesn't really have enough oomph to be its own episode. But it is great, and it serves as the first half, and the second half is some really good stuff. There's the stuff with Bran, which I thought was pretty well handled. There are some great resolutions to characters. The way that people are left off is all really well handled. I really like the final moments of the episode, and overall I just think that the second half ties stuff up in a nice way, and a way that I never would have expected from this show. I thought this show would be much more vicious and rude and cruel to its characters, but instead it leaves them in a pretty nice place. Not a perfect place, but a pretty nice place, and it ends the show, I think, the best way that it could have ended in terms of for the characters, because they all leave off in a pretty positive place, and as few people die as possible. I thought that there would be some significant deaths, but there was only one in this episode. It was literally the fewest deaths that they could have possibly had. And I thought that this was just a great way to end the show. And even though it wasn't a perfect episode, it felt a little bit disjointed. The two parts didn't quite mesh together. So the experience feels a little bit disjointed. But because of what works, it works well enough that it doesn't really come as that big of a deal. So while it doesn't feel like a whole package of an episode, it feels like a couple of episodes a little bit smashed together. What we do get as an end result of that is really good entertainment. So it didn't bother me all that much, and I really appreciated the scenes that we got. And I thought this was just a fantastic way to close out what has been a great season of television and a great television series. So yeah, the Iron Throne. That was it. That was Game of Thrones. And I thought it was a imperfect but great way to close out the show. And the high moments are so high. It does have a couple of issues, so it's not perfect, but the high moments are so high that I have to give this episode a strong rating. And the Iron Throne does earn a really strong rating of 9.75 out of 10. So that's it, folks. Game of Thrones Season 8, The Iron Throne, the whole show. It's over. That's the whole thing. Wow. This is it. It's over. I really can't believe it's over. I'm never going to witness another episode of Game of Thrones in my lifetime, which is a little bit crazy to me, but that's just how it is. And ultimately, I'm satisfied with the conclusion of this. I thought that the finale had its issues, and I'm going to dive a little bit more into those in my Season 8 review, which I will be releasing at some point in the next couple of weeks here. I'm going to have to rewatch the season and really form opinions about certain things and really be able to explain certain criticisms that I have, because I do have a couple of criticisms. It's not a perfect season of television. In fact, it's probably not the best season of Game of Thrones. Definitely not the worst, though. And I have some criticisms that I would like to be able to elaborate on and some things that I really liked I would like to be able to expand on, and just be able to give my full formed opinion of season 8 after I do rewatch it and am able to fully understand all the aspects of it that I need to, and just have it fresh in my brain. But overall, I was satisfied with the resolution to this episode. And when I come back for my season 8 review, I will also be touching on the predictions that I made at the beginning of the season, which, if you remember them, which I would be shocked, I'm sure you don't, I was very wrong about many of them, and we will definitely talk about those in season 8 review. Basically, season 8 review, I'll talk about as much as possible, but I'm already basically wasting time. So in the next couple of weeks, I will have a review for the whole season, but for now, that's my review of the first 6 episodes, all 6 episodes of season 8 of Game of Thrones. Overall, I really liked it. I mean, I gave every episode a rating of higher than 9 stars, so you can tell I really liked this season. But anyway, if you join me soon, I'll give you my review of season 8 of Game of Thrones. Sorry for the delay of this one. There's been some chaotic happenings that have been keeping these reviews away from you. But if you're interested in any Doctor Who reviews, I've got those coming out weekly. I've got another ranking video coming out for Series 11 very soon, and I also have a video about the Judoon that is either already out or is out soon. And yeah, folks, that's going to do it for now. Got lots of stuff coming out these days, and just released this one, and I thank you very much for watching. I would love to know what you thought about season 8 of Game of Thrones, or specifically the finale, because that's the episode we are talking about today. So yeah, let me know what you thought down below, and if you agree, if you disagree. I'm sure a lot of people disagree, but that's gonna do it for now. Thank you for watching, take care, and have a lovely week.